Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today I will be discussing about Asian financial crisis 1997, the history behind it, and the causes of Asian financial crisis. So the history behind the Asian financial crisis is Asian financial crisis, also known as Asian contagion, was a sequence of currency devaluation and other events which began in the summer of 1997 and spread to the Asian markets. Thailand was the first country that faced the failure of currency as the government decision to no longer peg to the local country but to the US dollar, USD. So, moving to the next slide. Okay. The causes of Asian financial crisis in 1997. So during the late 1980s and early 1990s, many Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and South Korea, achieved massive economic growth of an 8% to 12% increase in their gross domestic product, GDP. So the achievement was known as Asian economic miracle. However, a significant risk was embedded in the achievement. The economy is boosted by the export growth and foreign investment. High interest rate and fixed currency rates pegged to the US dollar were implemented to attract hot money. Hot money is a fund that are controlled by investors who actively seek short-term returns. These investors scan the market for short-term, high interest rate investment opportunity. So exchange rate was pegged at a rate favorable to exporters. However, both the capital market and corporates were left exposed to foreign exchange risks due to fixed currency exchange rate policy. Historical experience suggests that high economical growth may make an economy more vulnerable to a crisis. So in the peak in 1996, Thailand reached its peak at 5.7% annual GDP. The Federal Reserve raised the interest rate against inflation. The higher interest rate attracted hot money to flow from the US market, leading to appreciation of the US dollar. Currencies pegged to the US also appreciated. So the causes of Asian financial crisis, we can see from here, the appreciation of currency pegged to the US dollar caused major financial pressure with a shock in both export and foreign investment. Asset prices, which were leveraged by large amount of credits, began to collapse. The panicked foreign investor began to withdraw. The massive capital outflow caused a depreciation, a pressure on the foreign currencies on the Asian countries. Thailand government are the first ran out of foreign currency to support its exchange rate, forcing it to float the baht. Hence, the value of baht collapsed immediately afterwards. It happened to, and then it's also happened to the rest of Asian countries. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Sarah with metric number 2011874 from section 2. And today I will be explaining about Asian financial crisis 1997 and its social impact and economic impact. So let's begin. The economic impact of Asian financial crisis in 1997 is that it caused the currency of Asian countries like Thailand's baht to depreciate tremendously. At first, the baht devaluation was expected to increase the net export, but it failed to increase the net export because many other Asian countries were also depreciating in currencies, such as South Korea, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The currency depreciation in these countries have incurred large losses for small and medium-scale enterprises, especially for the companies that use imported raw materials. Hence, due to the higher cost of production from the imported materials, the companies decreased their output levels as they were suffering losses. A prominent example of this is when the overall output of the manufacturing sector in Thailand declined to negative 15% at the end of 1998. So, just like what we have learned in class, when the output level decrease, the unemployment rate will increase, and consequently, this will cause the national income and society's overall purchasing power to decrease. So, the reduction in output level has led to higher unemployment rate. For instance, in South Korea, the unemployment increased by almost 5% from 1997 to 1998, and Thailand's unemployment shot up by almost 3% in 1 year. And another impact is the national income and society's purchasing power have also fluctuated from this Asian financial crisis. To illustrate my point, Malaysia, Thailand, Korea, and Indonesia have shown a significant decline in their gross national income per capita within the year 1997 until 1998 as depicted by the World Bank 2000. During its trough in 1998, South Korea has reached highest unemployment rate of 7%, while Thailand's unemployment peaked at around 4%. In 1998 too, many Asian countries hit their lowest GDP growth rate, with Malaysia dropping to negative 7.6% and Indonesia fluctuating to negative 13.2%. And now that I have covered the economic impact of Asian financial crisis, I will move on to the social impact. So the societal impact of this crisis is that it caused political disruption. This is because the leaders of a few Asian countries have renounced their position, such as the President of Indonesia, Suharto, and the Prime Minister General of Thailand, Yong Chai-yut. They have both resigned because they gained enormous pressure from a lot of sides. And because of that, they took a step back from this leadership position and let someone else who's more capable to lead the country in this financial and economic struggle.
Case, which is the Great Recession 2007 till 2009. So it is a period of general decline in national economies globally, meaning that it happens all around the world and not only in Malaysia. So the due is occurred between 2007 till 2009. So the scale and timing of the recession varied from country to country, meaning that every country has different scale and timing of the recession. So if you can see the map here, it shows the real GDP growth rates of countries, whereby the country in brown were in recession, which the real GDP stated is negative and below. Next, the International Monetary Fund concluded that the Great Recession 2007 to 2009 was the most severe economic since the Great Depression. So next, we move on to what happened in Great Recession. So basically, the situation happened because of the bursting of the US housing bubble, whereby from 2001, successive decrease in the prime rate, which is interest rate that bank gives to low-risk customer, enable banks to issue mortgage loans at lower interest rate to millions of customers. And those customers are those who normally at the first place doesn't even qualify to purchase housing. So this situation increased the demand for house and set up the house's price for even higher. But when in 2005, the interest rates finally begin to climb, many customers are not able to pay for the loan payment. So somehow the demand for houses begin to decrease, causing the houses prices to fall. So as subprime mortgage market collapse, many banks are in serious trouble because their assets right now are in the form of subprime mortgage, which is less risky loan. So which kind of, it doesn't benefit it for them. So like it or not, in order to survive, the banks have to reduce the credit extent given to customers and businesses. That's why many businesses were forced to reduce the expense and investment. And how do they reduce the expense? For sure, they will fire some workers, which leads to widespread of job losses. Now, to point out again the causes of Great Recession, the first one is the widespread failures in financial regulation, where many banks are in serious trouble because their assets are now in form of subprime mortgage, which is less risky loan. And the second one is the dramatic breakdowns in corporate governance, where many businesses were forced to reduce their expenses and investments. And the third one is excessive borrowing and risk by households and Wall Streets, whereby many of customers purchase loan that normally they are not qualified to purchase, and right now they kind of cannot pay for the loan as the interest rates.
Next, I will explain about the economic impact of the Great Recession 2007 and 2009. As we have all learned, in the peak of the Great Recession, there was a price bubble for the housing sector, and this price bubble beats up the prices of the housing sectors, and in 2007 the price bubble bursts, which triggers the subprime mortgage market to collapse. Demand of the housing sectors plummet and the price decrease. This is just like the economic law that we have always learned. When demand decrease, the price decrease. So the financial institutions suffer losses as the customers could not pay back their mortgage. The situation is very alarming to the bank's wealth. Hence, even the interbank credit flows, meaning that the bank couldn't even lend their wealth to other banks. And banks couldn't even lend their money to credit-worthy borrowers because of their rapidly depleting wealth. So banks' incapability to extend loan has forced most business to reduce their output level because most business cannot borrow from the bank anymore. They have to reduce their output level. And in 2007, there was a decline in total output level by 4.3%. As the output level was reduced, more workers are laid off, and this gives a significant 6% rise of unemployment rate in America as compared to the previous years. The GDP growth rate has also declined by 5.1%. So I have finished elaborating about the recessionary phase of the Great Recession.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Syafia binti Nur Syabani. My metric number is 2017360. Okay, when Trump, from the beginning of the recession in December 2007 to its official end in June 2019, real gross domestic product, which is GDP, declined by 4.3%, and unemployment rate increased from 5% to 9.5%, peaking at 10% in October 2019. So, because of these unemployment rate increases, job losses in the Great Recession were huge, and it took much longer than in previous recessions simply to get back to the level of payroll employment at the start of recession. So, because of this, employers did not begin to add jobs until 2010. Okay. And then we have social impact caused by Great Recession 2007 to 2009. First, because of too many interventions, the country's economic trouble were far from over. So, in March 2008, investment banking giant, which is Western's, collapsed after attributing its financial troubles to investment in subprime mortgage, and its assets were acquired by JP Morgan Chase at a cut rate price. So, a few months later, financial behemoth, which is Lehman Brothers, also declared bankruptcy for similar reasons, creating the largest bankruptcy filing in US history. Second social impact is the Dow Jones Industrial lost more than half stock of market value, falling to 6,547 points. As a result, hundreds of thousands of Americans who had significant portion of their life saving invested in the stock market suffer catastrophic financial losses. So the net worth of American household and non-profit declined by more than 20% from a high of $69 trillion to $55 trillion.
Moving to the next slide. The next slide is the COVID-19 recession. So, what is COVID-19 recession? COVID-19 recession is a major ongoing global economic crisis which had caused a recession in some nations and in others, a depression. It is the worst global economic crisis since the Great Depression. So, the economic crisis began due to the economic consequences of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The first major sign of a recession was the collapse of market during 2020 stock market crash, which began in late February and lasted through March. So, short brief about 2020 stock market crash is triggered by COVID-19. So, natural gas, food, healthcare, and software stock earn high positive returns. However, petroleum, real estate, entertainment, hospitality fall dramatically.
Next, let's see to the causes of COVID-19 recession. So the first one is the lockdown. So the pandemic basically has affected nearly every major industry negatively because when people cannot go to work, the industry cannot go on smoothly as before. So there are so many kinds of limitation, challenges that kind of hold back the industry as a whole, which negatively impact every measure of industry. So the next is lockdown is one of the main causes of the stock market crash. So when people cannot go outside, for example, when they cannot go outside, they for sure will not be able to use their car, so the demand for oil for sure will decrease. So the price for petroleum will also decrease, and this caused the stock market to crash and falling down. So the third one is stay-at-home orders clearly affect many types of business, and yes, many businesses are affected during this pandemic, such as Grab services, salon services, food services, and etc. So basically, everyone is struggling and everyone is affected by the lockdown of COVID-19 pandemic. So the second causes is Russia Saudi Arabia oil price war. So COVID-19 significantly impacts the demand for oil, because when people cannot go outside, they will not use their car and they will not demand for oil. So this significantly impacts the demand for oil, whereby the demand will decrease. Moreover, the war between Russia and Saudi Arabia regarding oil price become a cause in worsening the recession due to crashing the price of oil. So at first, both parties agreed to increase the oil production to stabilize the oil price, but the negotiation breaks as Russia resisted calls to cut production. So this the fear for the price war caused a plunge in US stocks and give impact on American producers of shale oil. But this situation settled down in early April 2020, and as Saudi Arabia and Russia agreed to oil production cuts. To the
Okay, next we will discuss about COVID-19 pandemic. So when COVID-19 happened, recession happened to country around the world. So COVID-19 has led to a volatile economy, and the initial outbreak of the coronavirus in China disrupted global supply chains, and hospitality and travel are two of the biggest industry impacted by COVID-19 due to the travel cancellations, restaurant and bar closures, and low consumer confidence. So another impact that we can see clearly is many small businesses have been permanently closed when pandemic occurred. In New York, overall employment declined significantly, totaling a 39% reduction from January. This result include businesses that had temporarily closed also. So, based on study, it can be seen that smaller firms with fewer than 20 employees in January were more likely to be closed, and firms with between 66 and 90 employees in January had the largest employment reduction. So across industry, in-person retail and service businesses had declined precipitously. Although hard hit, the impact was not as extreme for professional services from banking and finance, real estate or construction. Okay, another perspective that we can see when recession is government, the ongoing public health and economic crisis due to the pandemic will give impact to the deeply low and middle income countries, domestic public resource by affecting their tax and non-taxes revenues. For example, we can see sub-Saharan African government revenue declined by 12% to 16% compared to a non-COVID-19 baseline scenario. As a consequence, fiscal deficit deteriorate by about 2.7 to 3.5 percentage point of GDP. Another example is in Peru, tax revenue decreased by 40% year on year in April 2020, while in Jordan, overall government revenue have been decreased by 49% year on year in April 2020 also. So another impact that we can see is domestic private investment also declined due to the high degree of economic uncertainty, contraction of economic output, and also binding liquidity constraint. Also, okay, then when Trump happened, currently almost all countries around the world, real GDP is less than -3. So, the lowest real GDP hits during the pandemic for advanced economies such as Australia, US, and Canada is negative 5.8, while emerging market and developing economies like Madagascar and Mali is negative 3.3. And then we have the average real GDP for all countries around the world is negative 4.4. This data can be seen from International Monetary Fund 2019. And lastly, we have social impact caused by COVID-19 pandemic. First, it caused disruption of food chain. The pandemic has affected the entire food system, so it revealing its fragility. What happened is because of border closure, trade restrictions, and confinement that have been prevented farmers from entering the market to buy inputs and selling their product. And also farm workers from harvesting crops, interrupting domestic and international food supply chains, and reducing access to healthy, safe, and diverse diets. And lastly, the social impact that have been caused by COVID is social protection and healthcare. Informal economic workers are particularly vulnerable because the majority lack social protection and access to quality healthcare, and also have lost access to productive assets. Due to the lockdown, people cannot earn an income, thus many of them are unable to feed themselves and their families. So for them, they think that when they cannot earn income, no income means no food, or at best they only can eat less food or less nutritious food. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Aisha Sufina binti Syamsul Azhar and my matric number is 2016690. Okay, so for the conclusions, what we can learn from the crisis and the future precautions. So every crisis is different, but the ingredients are often the same. Like after all, it relates to humans' nature and our propensity for greed and fear. Okay, first, the 1997 financial crisis had a widespread and catastrophic effect across the region. Countries including Thailand, Korea, and Indonesia effectively went bust, and it took years for the worst hit economies to recover. What we can do to overcome is the economy has to allow exchange rates to be more flexible, because most Asian currency are pegged to the US dollar, forcing the central bank to use limited foreign currency reserves to defend it. And today, after the recovery of the crisis, Asian currencies have more flexibility. Back in 1997, the worst hit economies of Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and South Korea saw their currency lost more than 50% of their value against the dollar. And what we can learn is the countries that involved in this crisis have responded by improving their economic frameworks. Financial oversight, macroeconomic frameworks, and domestic competitiveness have been greatly strengthened. As a result, the region has experienced solid growth in the intervening period and proved resilient in the global financial sector. The region has also developed stronger collective institutions, and the crisis has prompted efforts to no longer rely on the International Monetary Fund (IMF) due to major mistakes made in response to the crisis. Next, the lesson from the Great Recessions from 2007 till 2009, where the financial crises were painful and profound. We don't know many things about the future, but we can predict that the past will be different than the present. Those who experienced a recession 10 years ago and may be struggling now should seek solace in knowing that the situation will eventually improve. Swift or rapid, unprecedented, and extreme measures were put into by the government and the Federal Reserve at the time to stem the crisis, and reforms were put into place to try and prevent a repeat of the disaster. Lastly, what we can learn from the COVID-19 recessions now is that once the pandemic passes, more business will more likely give flexible working arrangements the tick of approval, which would include shifting away from traditional office spaces to more co-working spaces. As long as hygiene practice and health precautions are enforced, co-working spaces provide an alternative for businesses in need of a substitute workspace that may prove useful. The company will also place greater emphasis on cost optimizations and prefer flexible workspace. A large number of companies will avoid capital expenditures and look for collaboration facilities to grow their business. The collaborations industry may also see consolidation in the near future, and companies will explore acquisitions opportunities. The current situation will also see large enterprise looking for smaller spaces to ensure a synergistic business continuity in the near future. So that's all from us. Thank you.